nominating committee actually initiated the call for proposed bylaw change. And a bylaws committee was convened, and that is chaired by David Goggins, our vice president. And I'm going to pass the baton to David, who, you want to run it from up here?
I think that's good from here.
Okay.
I'm going to start first. I'll stay seated if that's
so
right.
I'll kick it over to you and proceed.
Thank you for it. Again, those of you I don't know, I'm Dave Goggins, Vice President, talking to you tonight in my, I think, only official duty as Vice President, that is Chair of the Bylaws Committee. Let's see.
Could you please stand up, David?
Would you like me to? Sure. Well, I've been asked to briefly explain why it is that we're making this proposal here tonight and give you some background as to the process that took place that got us here. The proposal for extending term limits came, as Ford mentioned, from the nominating committee, which consists of the chairman, Jim, myself, and Secretary Jen Crampton, which was appointed by President Ford this summer in accordance with the bylaws to identify candidates for office and present a slate of nominees to the NEWRA membership for vote. That's my first point. I've got 3 more, and I'll make it quick. The membership was notified of the proposed bylaw change in writing by the Bylaws Committee in accordance with Article 11 of the bylaws, which requires 30-day advance notice of any proposed changes. That change was communicated in writing by email to all the membership. It was advertised in the local press, both widely on Matt's blog, NorthEndWaterfront.com, and received front page treatment from the Regional Review as well. Point number 3, the proposed changes to the term limits language seeks to achieve basically 2 goals. The elimination of ambiguity and the relaxation of an arbitrary restriction that was deemed to be unnecessarily restricted. Several past and present NEWRA officers have stated that they felt that they were basically just hitting their stride in terms of making a contribution at the executive committee level in their roles, whether it be treasurer, vice president, or president, when they were forced, essentially termed out of their office. And I think it's this feeling of not having enough time to contribute and, as an executive was particularly felt by people who may be newer to the association and weren't as familiar with the rules and the way that issues were presented. So there is a bit of a learning curve, and I'll be the first to admit I've been on the executive committee now for 2 years. First as treasurer, and then secondly as vice president for this past year. And I felt that if I was forced to step down this year, that I would be missing out on an opportunity to continue to make a contribution. So that's my third point. My final point has to do with the timing of the proposed changes. Why are we bringing this to the membership now? This issue was moved to the forefront after the nominating committee's efforts to find replacements for the 2 offices that were being termed out this year, President and Sergeant at Arms. That process unfortunately produced mixed results. While the nominating committee was able to find several qualified candidates for the Sergeant at Arms position that Robin will sadly be vacating at the end of her term, the committee was unable to find anyone interested in serving as president. Many of you have approached me privately to either ask me if I would be running or encourage me to fill or attempt to fill Ford's shoes. And I'll tell you all now what I've been telling everyone who's asked up until now, who would listen to me anyway, and that is that I've had the pleasure of working very closely with Ford over the last 2 years, so I know firsthand the time commitment that's required for anyone that is even contemplating serving in the office. As you all know, the president is the voice of the association, both internally at executive committee meetings, monthly meetings, and helping out chairing other committees as well. So internally, he's essential to the operations of the association. And he also serves as the voice to external entities with which NEWRA interacts on a very regular basis. Those entities include, of course, city and state officials, other neighborhood associations, inquiries from the press, concerns expressed by business entities. The list is very long. And Ford, in my opinion, has done the job incredibly well. Because of because of personal and professional obligations, I will not be able to vote even a fraction of the time that the presidency requires, much less anything close to the monumental effort that Ford has devoted to the office over these past 2 years. So the nominating committee, in the absence of any candidates for president, felt that asking Ford to serve an additional year by initiating the change in the bylaws would be preferential to the alternative of leaving the office vacant for an undetermined period of time until a candidate materialized to fill the void. So that was my last point, but I wanted to make one more point of clarification, and that is, and I'll be done, I'll sit down. The effective term of all elected officers, from Sergeant at Arms, Treasurer, Secretary, Vice President, President, is just 1 year since we hold annual elections, and we'll continue to hold annual elections, regardless of what the term limit is. And those elections will be held every October, as they always have, and any person, any member of the association can throw his hat in the ring and challenge an incumbent for his seat, and that's not going to change at any time. So even though the proposed change is to extend the opportunity for Ford, or anyone else for that matter, to serve beyond what many consider to be a restrictive 2-year term, again, it doesn't either require Ford to stay on for the full term, and nothing changes with respect to people tossing their hat in the ring, and in fact, additional candidates would be welcome to run for open offices. We've been successful over the last few years in growing membership, and we'd like to continue to do that, and the nominating bylaws committee feels that by making these changes at this time, that'll help to do just that, expand membership and encourage more people to become more actively involved. So at this point, I'm going to open it up first to any questions. If anybody has any, if there's anything I wasn't clear enough on in terms of what we're proposing to change the bylaws. Actually, I should probably read what the proposed bylaw change is. Would that make sense?
Yeah.
So the currently the bylaws with reference to term limits
It's at
states,
the bottom of the agenda here, if anybody wants
and
to
I'll read it out for you if you don't want to read it yourself. No officer may serve more than 2 years consecutively. And the proposed change would state no officer may serve for more than 4 years consecutively in the same position. So it accomplishes two things. It extends it eliminates the requirement to step down from office after 2 years, and it clarifies the ambiguity of holding an office in the same position. Right now, I guess, if you were to try to take the literal meaning of the existing bylaws, you could interpret that after serving 2 years in any office, you'd be forced to step down or go on to serve in any other capacity until the next election cycle. So that clarifies both points. So any questions about that? Please.
Bob Stoll, Commercial Street. This is the Ford Amendment. If you had found 5 people to run, you wouldn't need this amendment, would you? Well, did you ask me to run? Did you ask anybody to run? I don't know. You say you couldn't find it. This is the Ford Amendment, to give Ford, with all due respect for it, with all your hard work, 2 more years. Why would anybody want this tough job? 2 more years. It's great that you want it, but...
let me attempt to answer that question for you. There are a lot of reasons why the executive committee, the nominating committee, and the bylaws committee felt that extending the term limits was a good idea. And first and foremost is nobody wants change simply for the sake of change, which can be interpreted as a penalty of having term limits. If someone is willing to put in the effort, make the sacrifices, is doing a good job, and would like to continue doing that good job, it would be a shame to lose their contributions simply because the bylaws decided to make it a two-year term instead of a 3 or 4 year term. In terms of accommodating Ford, I served on the nominating committee, so I can speak firsthand. I want to speak for Jim, who's our chair, but we reached out to everyone we could think of.
And it was announced at the monthly meetings for the last 2 months.
For the last 2 months, encouraging people to come forward, approach anybody on the nominating committee, and talk to us if you're interested in any of the offices. We were more than willing to do whatever it would take to find a suitable candidate for the office. So it wasn't from lack of effort. There was no alternative motive by any of these execs to push to have Ford stay on more in favor of having him replaced with someone else who was at all qualified for the job. In fact, Ford has stated on many occasions to me and to other members of the executive committee that he doesn't necessarily want to stay on as president, but he's agreed to the recommendation of the nominating committee to avoid the alternative, which would be to have the office vacant for who knows how long until someone else was willing to step in.
And you do enjoy it.
And he enjoys it, and I think he does a pretty good job of it.
There are worse jobs.
Question?
Oh, no, sorry,
Good.
comment.
Any other questions before we move to the comment phase?
Dorothy Keppel, East India Road. I just wondered about the other community groups. Do they have a time limit as well?
A term restriction, you mean,
Yeah.
on elected offices? I'm not sure, but I would defer that question to Ford, who works very closely with the neighborhood associations in his role as representative on AGCO.
Most of the associations outside of the North End have a much more evolved progression of officers. Usually a 2-year presidency leads to a 2-year chairmanship. Like that's the NAB model, that's the Beacon Hill Civic model. So the officers are essentially trained in one position, doing more operations, and they move to the executive position. So there's a 4-year runway there, and that's part of the reason that the 4-year language came in, because that was sort of the proxy for that. So yes, these term limits are much shorter than many of the other associations. And I did want to mention one thing. I mean, Jen mentioned, you sort of like the job. Yeah, I'm a bit of a ham, I don't take myself too seriously. I take the job very seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously. I think that's a plus. But I did want to say that, I sort of, when the committee asked me to do this, I felt a little uncomfortable. I said, I don't want to be a Bloomberg here. I did pause for a moment and say, well, hold on, what am I saying? But in terms of the optics of the election, I said, if you guys want to do this, that's great. It would have to have the members vote on it. It needs a bylaw, the full bylaw vote. But if you guys want to do it and you want to ask me to stay on, I would do that. But it's certainly not something that I had expected. And in fact, I was a little surprised. It came up in a discussion where another officer, I'm not going to identify that officer, who was on the committee, was indicating that in the non-president role, and remember, everyone's term limited. The treasurer, the secretary, the vice president, the sergeant at arms is where it's all term limited, which is unusual. Most places only would term limit a president. But one of the people in another office was saying, I'm just getting the stride of this thing, and isn't it crazy to have a rule that kicks you out after you get good at the job? So that was sort of the nascence of it, to the point about the Ford Amendment. So yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable about people thinking about it.
There's still annual elections, though.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable about people thinking about it as the Ford Amendment, and I would ask you not to think of it that way. And it's not the way I'm thinking of it. I look at this as, if they want me to serve, if you want me to serve another year, I do it. If you don't want me to serve another year, I won't. Annual elections every year, never going to change. That's the most important thing.
And one thing I failed to mention, for changes to any of the bylaws, and there will probably be more changes proposed to the bylaws, because they're not bad bylaws, but there are some vagaries and ambiguities in here that need to be cleaned up, and that's on the to-do list for the executive committee in the coming year. But in order to make any amendments or changes to the bylaws, it requires not only proper notification and discussion at a meeting, but also a higher standard of vote. It has to not just be a majority vote, but a 2/3 membership approval of any changes. So just so you're all aware of that. Any other questions, David?
Comments?
Comments? Any other questions from the members or anyone in the audience for that matter? Okay, we'll open it up for comments. Mr. Kubiak.
Dave Kubiak, Cleveland Place. Ford, I think you've done a tremendous job as president, and I know that you've worked as hard, maybe even harder, and contributed as much to this organization as any president in the 19 years that I've been a member of this organization. I would support an amendment to the bylaws changing the term limits. My preference would be to go to 3 years as opposed to 4. I would support that in the future if it's brought to another meeting after this election. I would even support it tonight if it was necessary to fill the president's position. What my understanding is that nominations to any of the offices can be made right up to the meeting, including the meeting. And a nomination can be made by a member for him or herself or for some other member. And my understanding is, and you haven't shared this with us, is that a member of this organization has placed her name into nomination for president. And so, therefore, I think we should be considering that before we decide the necessity of amending the bylaw tonight. That's it.
I'm going to let the chair of our nominating
Yeah, I'd like
committee
to
address
say that
Jim Smith.
no one's been nominated yet. We haven't taken nominations.
Why haven't you? When are you
Because
taking
the
them?
election comes
So we're going
after
to
this.
wait until after, we're voting now because you've told us if we don't vote on this amendment, we may not have a president.
I didn't say
And then afterwards, you're going to take
I didn't say
nominations. Does that make any sense?
I didn't say that.
You just said that. Did anybody hear anything differently?
There are no nominations at this point. We haven't started the
What-
election.
There has been a nomination. Members nominate themselves, and there has been a nomination. The executive committee or the nominating committee may not have accepted that nomination, and I'd like to know why, but the nomination has been made.
Okay, why? First of all, we met on September 9th. That was when the nomination committee first met. And we had no nominees for president.
Yeah.
And
What about tonight? Let's not talk about September 19th.
may I speak, please?
Let's talk about tonight.
He's out of order.
Let him speak, Jim.
Let him speak.
Excuse me, David. Let
We've
Jim
heard
speak.
so much about the history of this, and yet the crux of the matter, which is, are we going to be without a president if we don't vote on this amendment, is not the case.
Jim is going to explain to you the protocol for nominations and elections.
Okay, we met on September 9th, and we had no nomination for president. So, being that we didn't want to leave that position open, it's rather important. We have to have someone on the meetings and sign the letters. We decided that the best person for the job, and maybe at that point the only person, but certainly the best person, would be Ford. And the only way
In your opinion.
Please don't interrupt me.
That's the vote of the membership on who should be
Do I need
president.
to
and
get
who's
the
best
statute and
in a
arms to
position.
escort this gentleman
This is
out
the
the door?
problem with the
Let him-
current
let him
executive
finish.
committee. It is making decisions that should be left to the membership.
David, the whole purpose of this discussion tonight is to bring it to the membership. So if you let Jim continue, maybe he'll answer whatever concern or address whatever concerns you're expressing right now. So please, let's continue.
Thank you.
Be civil.
So we felt that the best candidate was Ford. Now, we didn't have any idea whether or not he would accept the nomination, so we did speak to him. And he did say that he would maybe accept 1 year if we could change the bylaws. So that was our only goal, and that was our only possibility at the time. The executive committee met on September 29th, and there were no other candidates for president. So it was endorsed that we would ask that the term limits be extended. That's why this discussion is taking place tonight. You have a question, Casey?
Yeah, not that you said this, but there was said that you seeked out other people who maybe want to be nominated. Are you saying that everyone said no? Or, because I'm a little confused what Dave brings up, if there are going to be nominations and.
Well, as I said, we had no other nomination.
So the nominating committee, he said you asked anyone and everyone.
Well,
And I can't run, but no one asked me.
Well, were you at either of the
So
last
don't
two
say you asked
meetings?
everyone and everyone, you didn't ask
Were you
it.
at either of the last two regular meetings?
You announced that there's.
Oh, someone.
We actually asked for candidates. I actually even
That I
2
remember.
meetings ago
But you
said,
didn't reach out to
please
me."
someone, run for my office. You know, so, yeah, I was expecting
That I
someone would.
accept, but that's not.
And the expectation of the nominating committee was that we would have more than one candidate express an interest in the office. And no one was more surprised or in fact disappointed that we weren't able to come up with even one candidate. And I'll accept part of that responsibility because I think there was a misperception among the membership that there wasn't an urgent need to find a successor because they expected that the vice president was going to step into that role, despite
But
my
you did
associates
ask
to the
people,
contrary.
you asked people.
We approached people, we asked people, we made it known at 2 consecutive meetings that there was an ongoing search and that people were welcome to contact any of the members of the nominating committee. And we successfully received interest from several people in one of the 2 offices that had a vacancy, the sergeant at arms. We're going to be nominating someone for that office as well as the current officers who aren't coming out of their position. So the next step in terms, and correct me if I'm wrong about how I generalize this, Jim, is to present in terms of the elections, the annual elections, is to present the recommended slate from the nominating committee and to open the floor to any other people who would like to throw their hat in the ring for any of the offices, whether it's an incumbent or a vacant position. That's always been the way the elections have worked at NEWRA. That's how they'll continue to remain going forward.
But, I don't know who's one.
My name's Ernest Haddad. I'm a retired lawyer, live at Lewis Wharf. I spent about 35, 40 years as a lawyer for nonprofit organizations. I'd like to speak just to the generic issue about term limits. My experience is that for virtually all the organizations that I have served have had, well, all of them have had longer term limits than we have had here. Experience was that shorter term limits led to less perfect governance. But term limits, very important to have term limits, but not so short. 2 years just is much too short. So I would vote in favor of the proposed amendment without reference to any candidates. I don't even know who the candidates are.
That's the problem.
Could I have
A comment, a question?
Yeah, it's a comment, and forgive me I thought about this because, and I need to.
Identify ourselves.
Okay, my name is Sue Bifanesti. I've been a NEWRA member since the inception, which was in 1995. The Residents Association was created to address neighborhood needs that were not given voice by other city boards and associations. But recently the neighborhood organizations have come under attack in several Globe articles about certain organizations, not ours, that have run amok when the leaders became entrenched and were negotiating monetary deals with developers and wielding personal influence in a strong-arm way. Again, I'm not suggesting this is NEWRA, but we have come under attack in the Globe in several articles and several editorials. In NEWRA, we have circumvented these less egregious but concerning agendas in the past here through and thanks to our bylaws. And one of those is the term limits. Because like the South End and the West End organizations that have been negotiating deals with developers, we don't do this. This is not how NEWRA works. But it is unfortunate that the Globe has painted all of our organizations in such a broad brush, with such a broad brush. Our bylaws originally were well thought out to prevent our association from becoming more about its leaders than its members. Limiting the executive office to 2 years was a way to keep the members as the face of NEWRA. In addition to that, we do not accept donations from developers. We do not approve of trying to raise money for an organization, which some people want to do, but it doesn't make any sense. And those are two important things. I think that any change in the bylaws should be well considered, but should not affect an election in the same session. I think that is just, on its face, is unacceptable and suggests something unseemly to me.
In what way? I'm sorry, I'm following. How is it unseemly?
Well, because for one, you said that we are doing this because we couldn't find anyone to run.
I think I said we're doing it for several
But we now have
reasons.
someone that's interested. So why aren't we taking nominations
Well,
first?
let me clarify that, because I think there's some confusion as to what I said previously. The nominating committee is commissioned by the executive committee to go out and find candidates for the election. Again, mixed results. We're able to find some people for some offices. Weren't able to find anyone for the president. So when the nominating committee reported back to the executive committee, they shared with them that results and also had a recommendation as to how to address that problem. That was the problem. We weren't able to, as far as we knew, going into the meeting tonight, we weren't going to have anybody who was willing to serve as president over the next year. So this was the cleanest, simplest solution to what we thought was a significant problem of having a very important position not being filled. Now, if it turns out that when we open up nominations before we have a vote for the slate that's been recommended by the nominating committee, there are other people who are interested in serving as president, that's great. They'll be able to stand before all the membership, explain to them why they should be considered for whatever office they want to run for. But what I'm telling you is, after an exhaustive search by the nominating committee, nobody was willing to step up to the plate until the 11th hour. That's why we're having this conversation.
Dave, you made this point, but even if term limits are extended, there is still an election and every office is up for election every year. So if this is extended, it doesn't mean Ford equals president. It means someone can still run against him. And if that's the will of the membership, that's the will of the membership. So we need to separate the issues.
It's just inappropriate that we're having this discussion on the same night that we have an election. I know that you've explained to us why we're doing it now, but it's just not appropriate.
Okay. Sorry, Phil. Any other comments? Mary?
Yes, Mary McGee, Snow Hill Street. Just to clear up any mystery, I am the mystery candidate who is going to run. And the reason that I came to this decision is that the chronology that has been set out was not my perception of the chronology. And I think there are those on the exec committee who do have a different perception as to how this came about. But the fact of the matter is that I was not clear that the vice president was not going to run, which is what usually does happen. Had I been clear on that, and that we would have gone to the extreme of having a bylaw change the same night as we're having the election, I would have stepped forward sooner. This became clear to me, I did step forward. If anyone else wants to step forward, I think that's fine too. But again, I think other people may want to comment, but if you want a bylaw change, I don't think this is how you do it. We've never done it this way. If you have a bylaw change, you have an ongoing committee, you have input from all of the members. We've just heard from a member who has thoughts on it. I'm sure there are other members who have thoughts on it that they have not had a chance to express. Have a committee, report to the organization at large, have a change, if you wish a change, and have it go into effect for the next election that comes up. In my opinion, that's the correct and the cleanest way of doing it. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Okay, before I take another comment, I'm going to address some of the things that Mary said. First, I'm not sure I understand what you were referring to in terms of the accuracy of the chronology you presented. So if you'd like to clarify that, feel free to do that, Mary.
I don't really think that's a helpful discussion to the organization.
Well, then I don't know why you raised it. Secondly, as we said before, anyone and everyone is welcome and free to step up and throw their hat into the ring and run for whatever of the 5 elected offices they'd be interested in serving in. So we're not stopping, we're not attempting to block anyone from doing that. Again, the nominating committee was commissioned with a mandate to come up with a slate for the new candidacy, and this was the recommendation that they brought to the executive committee. It's pretty much not more complicated than that. Steph?
Stephanie Hoag, Henchman Street. I'd like to address some of the concerns that were initially raised about why this whole bylaw change was even proposed. And for the sake of people who weren't part of the organization when I went through serving in several officer positions, I will say that I have served as Sergeant at Arms, Vice President, and President, and I'm very aware of the full court press that the Vice President gets when the serving President is going out. And it's also very true that our executive committee has been composed of people who are new to the organization, and I applaud and thank them for having taken on those roles. We do have a problem in NEWRA, and I don't think that extending the term limits is necessarily the answer. We may eventually decide that it is. What we have a problem with is a volunteer problem. And it's not only people happy to let other people do the job, it's people who are so busy doing the job that they don't feel like they want to take the time to train anybody else. But to be a robust, healthy, ongoing organization so that we continue to be the organization where residents can come in and have a vote in what happens, it's more than a vote. We need more than your vote. We need your 2 hands. We need your head. We need your time. We need your talents. And I think over the coming year, in addition to reviewing our bylaws and perhaps exploring how other organizations like us govern themselves, we have to start breaking down what are all the things that have to happen in order to do this every month. And we need to spell that out to the membership, and we need the membership to say, yes, I have this skill, I have this amount of time, I can help in this capacity. And then we have to say, great, we'll show you what needs to be done, and we'll do it. And that's going to be a lot of hard work, and I have already said that I will help Victor with the ZLC committee, because the ZLC committee is a virtual 1-person committee right now. And there's a lot of experience and knowledge that that man has, and we should be putting that to use on much bigger projects that impact our neighborhood and take some of the load off that comes to the routine sorts of applications that have to be reviewed. That work has to get done, but Victor's skills are better put elsewhere, I think. So I think we should take this year to try to make these changes. And this time next year, if we're still in a position of not enough help, then I would agree we need to look at extending the terms. Thank you.
Other comments? Sir.
Jim Ray, Commercial Street. I just think that irrespective of who's running, if there's one candidate, 2 or 10, 2-year term limits are just too short. I mean, I think it would be nuts if the presidency of the United States came up for if the president of the United States was term limited out after 2 years, because there's a lot to learn. And similarly, there's a lot to learn to be president of NEWRA, and 2 years just isn't enough.
So thank you for the comments. And obviously, the majority of the executive committee holds that same sentiment. Other comments? Sir?
I'm Steve Venezian, and I also live on Commercial Street. I, like Sue Benvenisti, was one of the original members like 20 years ago, and I did serve on the ZLC for several years. And so I totally appreciate how much time and effort is involved, and a lot of meetings that you have to go to on after a full day at work in the middle of the week that run for a couple of hours at a time. I did it for a number of years, as long as I could, and then I just couldn't do it. But my concern tonight is that it seems that we have the process backwards. If in fact somebody is willing to run, and if I've heard correctly, it is never too late to announce your candidacy, and it can be done tonight from the floor, then to my mind, then any discussion about bylaws changes is moot for the present and should be moved to a separate meeting when I've already heard that there was an intention later on to have a general meeting about changing any and all bylaws. This particular thing could be very easily moved to that discussion and vetted in much more detail than we're doing now. And then if after a full discussion about all the bylaws and a recommendation is made that certain things could be changed, then I think it should be entertained then. But now it seems to me it's moot because apparently there may be a candidate, so we don't have an issue of an empty spot. And worst case scenario, even if we did, and it could be filled in later, a month or so is not devastating, where we have a vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer. I think the organization would survive, you know, if we had a missing spot for a month or two. And it is, but this discussion, I think, is just out of order, and I just think that we should be able to proceed to a vote on its own merits without regard to time linking it to a whole discussion about bylaws.
Let's remember that the executive committee is there to facilitate the membership and I mean, there's a lot of work that goes in it, but it's not, you could go without a president for a few months. You could if that was the case, because, the wheel is already in motion. The membership knows how it runs. We know how to get the meetings done, and we help each other. And it just is, again, I just say it's an inappropriate time to have this vote.
Well, thank you for your comments, and to the gentleman there, thank you as well. Any other comments?
Michael Long, 63 Atlantic Avenue. I happen to agree that it takes a long time, or take more than 2 years to get fully acclimated to do a good job. I haven't been a member that long, I've been a member for a little over a year, but I have watched how hard Ford works and what he does, the hours that he spends. And I think you have a real practical problem here. There's a theory that's about process and everything, but if you don't do it in the order and way the executive committee has suggested, you've eliminated a very talented candidate for the position. Because if you don't make this bylaw amendment, the Ford is not eligible to run. So if that's what's going on here, it's let's acknowledge that. But if you could still, whether there's an empty seat or not, I don't think it's as important as the fact that you disqualify a very capable guy who's done a great job.
But a lot of us that have been on the exec committee, we are here in the group, so it's like we support each other, and the exec committee supports each other. When I was a treasurer, the vice president was supporting me in my job, and I in his, and it's not that black and white.
Well, but you're trying to have election, and if you have...
Well, let's have an election now then.
Right, well, because if you
In
have
the
an
interest of
election
time.
now, you
We still need to have
eliminated
an
one of the participants. So if you want to have Mary elected, if she's going to step forward, that's fine. But you've eliminated the possibility of Ford running. So that's the practical problem. I think your process.
I mean,
Well, I
is that,
think.
I'd like to nominate
Okay,
Mary.
before we conclude the discussion portion of this part of the meeting, I just want to clarify again that this is a separate issue and a separate vote from the election that's going to follow as soon as we conclude this matter. Again, in the interest of time, Jen, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I just want to say, as secretary, I have one statement, and then as my own personal, I have a couple. As secretary, I sent out the notification 30 days ago, or maybe a little more than that, about this potential change. And there have been some sidebar conversations going on amongst even some of the people that have spoken tonight, but there was not one member who emailed me back with any questions or concerns about this point. So I just want to make that clear for anyone who's speaking tonight and thinking that it's rushed or whatever. We sent out the notification, and I just want everyone to know I did not hear anything back. Again, aside from the conversations that have been had.
In that case, you're not on the executive committee mailing list because I sent in comments recently. I guess you didn't get those.
No, I'm saying members outside of the ones who, Dave, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to.
Outside of the ones that comment tonight, why is that important? Why is there a distinction between members who have commented and members who have not commented? I don't understand the distinction here.
I'm making a distinction between, you get the executive committee emails anyways?
Yes.
So amongst that group,
I don't know why
there
I
have
like
been,
and I wish I did.
there have been,
But when
there
I
has been
did comment,
discussion.
I started my comment with, as a common pedestrian member of the organization, and then I
Right.
made my comments clear.
there
So the
were-
point is, don't mislead people. I think you're misleading people into thinking you received no comments from anybody, and that's just not true.
When did you make?
And by the way, you really haven't given the membership an opportunity to really have this discussion and to learn enough to be able to comment. Only now are we having that discussion.
Well, we're going to have a vote tonight, and I would encourage everyone, if they feel as the majority of the executive committee and the nominating committee has suggested, that we don't want to tie our hands and restrict potential candidates from serving the office, that they vote in favor of the term limit extension. If you feel either that it's inappropriate for whatever reason to be discussing term limits at the same meeting that you're having an election, or if you felt that there hasn't been sufficient discussion or vetting of whatever other issues we might have failed to cover tonight, again, I've opened it up to the floor for anyone who wants to question or comment, to make sure that we don't overlook anyone's concerns or opinions. Then by all means, vote against it, and we can revisit this at another time. But the nominating committee was charged with coming up with a slate. In the absence of an alternative, this is what they came up with. At the 11th hour, the nominating committee was approached by Mary, throwing her hat in the ring. And when I say the 11th hour, I literally mean the 11th hour. So if it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before yesterday. I don't remember.
In accordance with our bylaws.
And again, not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just explaining to you, this was the recommendation from the nominating committee in the absence of any other candidates. If there are other candidates who are interested in running for any of the offices, they're encouraged to step up and introduce themselves to membership and toss their hat into the ring at the next part of the meeting. So one more comment, and then we're going to accept motions for votes.
I was just on a process question. What's brought to us tonight for amending bylaws?
Yes.
Is that spelled out? Is the process to amend the bylaws spelled out in the bylaws, and have you followed?
It is, and if anyone would like to read a copy of the bylaws, I have them here with me as
So
chair
it's
of bylaws.
followed to a T that you gave notice. It's only a month notice.
That's right. There haven't been any circumvention of bylaws. No one's changed. No one's recommending any other changes to the bylaws except for the one line in the bylaws under Article 5 that references officers. It says no officer may serve for more than 2 years consecutive, and that's all we're looking to change at tonight's meeting. So, and again, in the interest of time, I'm going to close the discussion phase and accept any motions for votes. And this is specifically on the proposed change to bylaws, not on the subsequent election of officers.
I move to vote.
Move to vote on the proposal that's on the floor for amending the bylaws to extend term limits from 2 years to 4 years in a specific office. All in favor of
I
voting?
second the vote.
The motion has been seconded. We're going to vote on it right now.
Cat ballot number 2, total votes. We have 25 supporting and 22 opposing. That is not a 2/3 majority, so no change.
Okay, we have 20 minutes to run the election.
15 minutes.
To do it quickly.
This is now.
We do have a slate. We no longer have anyone president on the slate, as Ford was the recommendation. So we will first vote for president, and then hopefully we can get through the slate, which will be the other 4 offices. Okay, so we don't have any nominee for president on the slate. Would anybody like to nominate someone from the floor for president?
Yeah, I nominate Mary.
One of them.
Will all the mayors stand up and tell which one is going to be?
Would somebody like to second that?
Second.
Okay. So we have 1 nominee so far. Anyone else would like to nominate someone for president? Okay, here's what I suggest, since Mary's not part of the slate. We use number 3.
Can we just prove acclamation and just
Yes. Because some people won't necessarily favor this candidate.
I nominate Ford.
Oh, he can't vote.
Okay, that's too bad.
Okay, thank you. I would say number 3, if you support Mary, circle support. You can also write in anybody you want, or that person will have to.
Number 3 with the skeleton on it?
Yeah. Or you can leave it blank, let's submit it blank. Dave, would you like to say something?
Oh, I think you've heard enough from me tonight, but I thank you for your continued support and hope you'll realize me the vice presidency.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Dave?
No.
Okay, would anyone like to nominate anyone else for vice president from the floor? Okay, Dave is our nominee. Secretary, we nominate Jennifer Crampton of Atlantic Avenue. This would be her 2nd year, and we feel she's done a very good job. Jennifer, while you come, would you like to say anything? Yes, she's got a special
Someone
bird
will help
here.
me home. She's incapacitated. That's it.
Okay, any other nominations from the floor for secretary? Okay, Jennifer will be our nominee on the slate. For treasurer, we'd like to nominate Ian DeLuca of Fulton Street, which would be her 2nd year. We think Ian, who's a business professional, has done a very good job. Would you like to say something?
Running for re-election, I'm from Fulton Street.
Any questions for Ian?
Yeah.
Just said that.
Okay, thank you. So Ian is our candidate for treasurer. And sergeant at arms, we have a new applicant who's Cheryl Del Greco from Commercial Wharf. It would be her 1st year. Michelle?
Good evening, everybody. I've been to a few meetings. I know a number of you already here. I would be delighted to work with all of you.
Even after tonight?
I neglected to tell you I'm on the board of my condo, so.
You don't have to sit there out of order.
No, I know how to.
Nobody's doing it here.
Any questions for Cheryl? Okay, any other nominations from the floor for sergeant at arms? Okay, so we have 4 nominees for the other offices. Vice President Dave Goggins, Secretary Jennifer Crampton, Treasurer Ian DeLuca, and Sergeant at Arms Cheryl Del Greco. There's no opposition. We have a motion to, by acclamation. And it's second on that?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, those in favor of those 4 candidates, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Sounds good. So we have 4 officers, and
I just did the same thing in the last vote, you told me I couldn't do it. So why would you be able to?
well, the slate can't be broken up.
Because they didn't go.
Mary didn't want to be on the slate, so.
Now I see their point, I mean, that's ridiculous, but okay.
I mean, there was one year we voted for each office, there was no opposition, but we didn't have time for it. Okay, so we have 9 votes, which basically do not recommend any candidate. We have 2 votes for Ford, which are not eligible, 1 vote for Dave Goggins, and 27 votes for
I know what I should be doing with this. I would just like to say very briefly that as other people have pointed out, that the persona of NEWRA is the members, and that the president is here to facilitate and let the members make their decisions that they want to make. And I think that this is not the kind of organization where we want to concentrate the power in the executive committee. It's in the members, it's always been, it's worked well that way. We are a residents association, we are all residents. So I'm looking forward to this strange journey, and I'm hoping, as Stephanie said, that people will help. And please let me know what you think you could do, what you would like to do. I really look forward to working with everyone. So. I'd like to say to Jason, I think you'll be very happy to have me up here, because I won't be getting in the last word anymore.
Yes.
I'm not more circumspect
We'll have all
up
the
here.
good first.
I'm not more circumspect, and a lot of people, I think, who will be happy about that. So, I think we're done. So, we haven't had any meeting out yet, so.